Hello, everyone. How beautiful it is to say hello, world. So many times I've thought about, first of all, a campus of consciousness when I was just at Unity of Tustin, and then expanding it into a worldwide campus of consciousness. And I think that's something that our guest today, our spotlight guest, Phil Goldberg, and I share in common. This passion of allowing consciousness to move out into the world worldwide. And when Phil and I met each other originally, uh, I doubt that the World Wide Web even existed then. I know it didn't when I went to Unity of Tustin in 1993. No World Wide Web.
It may
So
have been Marj, but we didn't know about it.
we didn't know about it. Uh, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, a beautiful gift to humanity when we can see the experience of consciousness and ask each other questions about it, as I'll be doing with Phil this morning. I was having questions come into my awareness as in my dream last night, asleep. It makes me wonder what it would have been like if we had had this kind of history available for recording to us the way that we do now. It's part of what makes me passionate about doing these recordings now as I go into my mid 80s and beyond. Phil is in his early 80s, and so we're both in the fourth act of our lives. And what a joy it is to say, welcome, Phil Goldberg.
Hey,
Uh,
Marj, so good to see you again.
Yes. And and to realize the journey we've been on when you were coming to Unity of Tustin and speaking, but when you called me and told me about American Veda and that you were in the midst of writing it and wanted to ask me some questions. So we've been asking each other questions for quite a number of years.
That's right. You were part of my research before I ever,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And you write about Unity of Tussin and you write about me in that book. And
and the
that,
whole history of unity.
yeah. And and it's been so meaningful to me. Of course, that makes American Veda my favorite of all of your books.
Strategically placed above
uh,
mine.
And it's fascinating because you and I have gone different routes with publishing. I've done print on demand and made the decision to self-publish, and you've gone with major publishers. And what I know is that those decisions for me, and I'm sure for you, were spirit directed because I know you. I know you that well. I
Yeah,
know, go ahead.
and I think you're right, but it was, to be honest, it was also, professional considerations and as a I always thought of writing as my primary career. And so many of my friends, like you, had primary careers, and writing was a complement to the primary career. I was in reverse. I always saw myself as a writer first. So I had to think of it in a different way. And cultivating relationships with publishers who could pay me and sell books and all that. It's a different algebra.
Yeah, yeah. And Andrew Harvey said to me when he was uh, supporting me in writing my book and teaching me how to write a book, he said, I want to introduce you to my publisher at Hay House. And I went into prayer about it and asked Spirit and got a clear answer that I was to self-publish. And I said to Andrew, I've read some of your edited books and I like the copy before the editing better than I do after. And he said, oh, I don't hardly read that.
You want to hear an Andrew Harvey related story?
Yeah.
On one of the occasions where he was presenting at Tustin, I had lunch with him, and I was about to go to India for some reason or another, and we were lamenting the shortage of book sales, and we decided that I should come back from India. I should get orange robes and let my beard and hair grow and come back from India and claim to be enlightened. And he would endorse me as the next great guru, and we'd make a lot of money.
I love playing. And I loved how when I asked you some questions about timelines and things, and I didn't get the questions to you in time for Garth, and you said, oh, nobody cares about those details. We'll
Yeah,
just have fun with it.
yeah, yeah.
But let's
The
go.
personal stuff, I could be lighthearted about, but information that matters, I get very rigorous.
So if I made any mistakes with information that matters, just get rigorous.
Okay.
And I love that we can play. I used to say to the congregation, I told you this at Unity in Tustin, don't take all of this so seriously. We're just playing church.
Yeah. Good for you.
And I always call the things that I did when I was making a major shift that might not be understood. I call them holy experiments. And that way, if we decided to drop it after 6 or 8 weeks or a few months, it it was just an holy experiment and it didn't work. And we went on to the next holy experiment.
Yeah.
I love that
That's,
kind of awareness, that kind of flexibility, that kind of
yeah.
flow. And so let's start with your life because I love the first picture that you sent to
Oh
me.
God. I get to look at old pictures now. Oh, that picture is so dear to
This
me.
picture, you said probably 10 or 11 years old, and you're
Yeah.
sitting with your parents.
Yeah.
And, and the thing
With a
that,
Brooklyn Dodger t-shirt.
oh, I hadn't noticed that. Oh, absolutely. Uh, Tell me about your parents. Goldberg, I'm assuming, has a Jewish lineage.
No, I'm from Whoopi's side of the Goldberg family.
All right. What does that mean?
Yeah, it means I'm joking. But they are, yeah, they're of Jewish heritage. The Goldberg actually was not the real name. It was like a lot of immigrants at that time. The story is my great grandfather emigrated here from what's now Ukraine and then was part of Russia. And he had a long, unpronounceable, unspellable name. So at Ellis Island, they just made him a Goldberg. And that was, that's how it happened, apparently. Um, but yeah, they had Jewish heritage. And where I grew up was a neighborhood in Brooklyn that was mostly Italians, Irish, East European Jews, and African Americans. It was an ethnic mix of first, second generation immigrants in this melting pot of immigration. And my parents were, I, I always say my household was not just non-religious, it was anti-religious. They were in the Karl Marx religion is the opium of the people school of religion. Their understanding of religion was such that, they saw a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of superstition and a lot of pious people who didn't walk their talk. And so that they had that view of religion. So we had no religious upbringing growing up. And they would mock religious people when a Passover would come around, and Jews were not supposed to keep certain food products in their home. They'd bring it to us because we'd eat it. And that's just the way they were. But they were extraordinarily kind, loving, compassionate, and ethical people. And that made the anti-religious part of it more convincing to me growing up. It's like my parents are these good, wonderful people that everybody loves and cares. They care about others. Isn't that what religion's supposed to do? And it didn't always live up to that. So I adopted, inherited the family attitude toward religion and was cut off from anything spiritual until I was in college in, the late 60s and everything exploded and things were different.
So, did your decisions relating to spirituality have any impact on your parents in their lifetime?
Sad to say, my mother died young before I started being drawn, just by a couple of years. And my father, who was a working class guy, um, very smart, but um, worked with his, hands, and he, was on building crews and, Manhattan skyscrapers and uh, putting in the pipes for the plumbing. He was a union guy and um, very smart, but not well informed and no interest in anything spiritual. Um, but again, a kind and decent man who uh, was bewildered by my own choices to get interested in Indian spirituality and uh, Buddhism and Hinduism and become a meditation teacher and all that kind of thing. He couldn't relate to that, but he understood its importance to me and he saw a personal transformation. He had been worried about me in my chaotic searching, few years, and was very pleased that meditation stabilized me and got me off of drugs. And so he was sympathetic, even though he couldn't relate. It
Well,
made
let,
me,
let's
yeah.
go into the next phase of your life.
Yeah, there I am. That's late
Isn't that a
60s.
fabulous picture?
That's around the time I started. Well, yeah, that's around the time my interests shifted. And, I've written about this, I've talked about it. I was part of, the generational, what we called the counterculture um, in my seeking years. And it's always um, been a source of sadness and curiosity. It's a curiosity that will never be satisfied, wondering if my mother had lived another few years, whether because she was more curious and open-minded than my father was, she might have gone found something of great interest in the interests I adopted and may have been open to it, may have been transforming for her. But of course, we'll never know.
Well, I'm sure she's observing you and watching you even now from the
And
other
it's entirely possible
side.
that from wherever she was in the cosmos in the couple of years after she died, that she very well may have been a guiding force behind my journey, and I wouldn't have known it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so this picture is a little bit later and
1976 to be exact.
a whole different look.
Well, yes. And, there's stories behind all that. But first, I'll tell you this. That picture, I discovered it and digitized it about, 10, 12 years ago. And I showed it to my then 9-year-old nephew. And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "That's me. That's your Uncle Phil." And he said, "That's you? What happened?" And, and I've been getting laughs out of that for the last 12 years. It was just so precious. Anyway, that was taken. My interest in Indian philosophy and the spirituality of the East, that grabbed me. I related to it very strongly. We can hypothesize about past lives or anything, or just stick to this life and my um,
Well,
thinking.
I love combining all of it.
All of it. I mean, who knows? But for whatever reason, I was in the cohort of people of my age, generation, who just gravitated to those teachings. They resonated with everything I was looking for and all the questions I was asking of the universe and were other sources. And when I first started reading those sources, I said, "Oh, this makes perfect sense." And I remember thinking, "Oh, if this is what religion is or spirituality, then I've been seriously misled. They left this stuff out." And I wanted more and more and more. So I took up transcendental meditation, and it was transformative in my life. It was at the time, 1968, when the Beatles went to India and meditation was on everybody's lips, and we learned the word mantra and guru and everything. So I was part of that, and it had such an impact on my life that I dropped out of graduate school to become a teacher of TM. And so that picture was me cleaned up like all the other teachers at that time, because we were told didn't want the hippie look. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi ran, it was, his thing. And he didn't want hippies. He wanted people who looked respectable. So, I remember going to Salvation Army to buy a used suit because I didn't own one, and shaving and cutting off my hair and all that. So that was taken in that era of me.
Well,
Uh,
you also moved around during these
yeah,
years of going to school. I mean, I related to that a lot myself because my move from New York to Massachusetts and coming back to Kansas City and going to California, I really related. We've had some parallel lives.
that's right. I grew up in New York, went to college in New York, then went to Boston for graduate school, and dropped out and had my first job and all that. And those were very transformative years. And then after becoming a TM teacher in 1970, I ended up living in a whole bunch of places for the next, you know, I don't know, 10 years or more, including California and the Midwest and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts again. And there was a lot of moving around.
And of course, in 1970, you were just entering what in this framework of the four stages, which is a Hindu framework, uh, you were just entering your second stage of life and
I
shifting.
suppose that's true. Yeah. But
Yeah. I sat down and figured it out just this morning.
okay. I mean, yes, chronologically that would make sense, but honestly, I never I'll tell you, I live such an untypical life that thinking in terms of life stages, it would always break down in my life because I got married for the first time when I was like 34 or 5. I got married for the second time when I was about almost 50. Um, I never had children. I didn't have a conventional job. So, and I didn't have conventional ambition as a young man. So it's hard to fit into the typical life stages. I'll tell you a story about that. I was thinking about it when you raised the question. Um, I told you about my parents. Well, my mother had an older sister, older by considerable, maybe 10 years or more. And she lived, we were in New York and Brooklyn, and she was in Philadelphia. And in the eyes of my mother and her other siblings, that aunt was a mystery. Everybody loved each other. They loved my aunt. She loved them. But the way they would tell it is somehow our aunt, unlike everybody else in the family, had become religious and went to church on Sundays, even though, whatever they were Jews by ancestry. So I found that that was interesting. But when I got to be in my young adulthood, and she heard that I was becoming a teacher of meditation, she wrote me and said she's really curious and would like to learn how to do that practice. So I went down to Philadelphia and to teach her and uh, transcendental meditation. And while I was there, I learned she was going to a church every Sunday, but it was a unity church.
Wow.
She was into unity. It was not a conventional, what my parents thought was some Christian thing. It was unity. I didn't even know about unity at the time. I realized later, oh my God, that's what she was talking about. She was talking about unity. And the other thing I remember about that was because in the conversations, it was like, oh, she's not talking like a conventional Christian believer. She's a mystic. And oh, this is an interesting church she goes to. And those are interesting books on her shelves, books by the
Fillmore's.
Charles and and Myrtle and Freeman and all these people who wrote for the New Thought. And it was new to me. Um, But then she revealed to me that she was an astrologer as well, and that she did the charts of every person born into the family, but she never told anyone because they would think she's nuts. But she could tell me. So she read into a tape recorder her analysis of my chart.
Wow.
Sad to say, when I got back to New York, my car was broken into and my suitcase was stolen. And so I never could listen to the tapes that was in the suitcase. But I remember one thing she said. She was looking at something in my chart and she looked at me right in the eye and said, don't ever try to live or don't ever expect yourself to live a conventional life or normal life. She said normal life. And every time subsequently, as went through life wondering what to do next and, thinking, am I making the right decisions? Why can't I be normal? I would remember her. And so my life was not normal. And so the stages are a bit mixed up.
I love it. So you're a Sagittarius,
Oh, yes,
and
Sagittarius.
that's very visionary, and it goes into the vastness. It goes
Yeah,
worldwide. And of course, that concept wasn't even around at that point in time, but she saw it.
yeah,
One of the things I see now, because I've gotten into astrology, I'm not a serious astrologer, but I read it every single day, cup full of stars. and um, and as I read it, I'm hearing the same thing from multiple people talking about next year, 2026 and 2027 are the beginning, a new birth, a new shift in consciousness where we're all going to be going into a more pure, more bottom up kind of awareness and a lot dissolving. And I just want to take a minute because I didn't do it at the beginning. My human mind forgot. I want to repeat the Charles Fillmore invocation. He called it this invocation. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, of love, and wisdom. I acknowledge this presence and this power. O blessed Spirit, now dissolve my mortal limitations and from your pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect plan. I have repeated that multiple times from the time I was the senior minister at Unity in Walnut Creek in 1987 to now. And along with the promise, which comes from A Course in Miracles, once you have accepted God's plan as the one function that you would fulfill, there will be nothing else. The Holy Spirit will not arrange for you without your effort. And then it goes on.
good.
Those
Worthy
are
of
words
repetition.
that reflect my life and also yours, Phil. And
Yeah.
you probably haven't even heard those two prayers or sing.
No, the first one sounds familiar, so I may have heard it at a Unity or something at one point,
Uh-huh.
but it bears repetition.
Yeah. So as you went through the second act of your life, um, yeah, you also were shifting into what you would become identified with for your lifetime, more of a writer and more of a teacher. And this picture is representative of that.
Yeah. Wow, I had hair.
You want to say something about this picture?
Uh,
This was from 1996.
yeah, so that's about 10 years after the previous picture. I think by then, Well, I think I published my first book in the 70s. Um, and I have to
Was
say,
that road signs?
no, Road Signs was around that time in the 90s. But I don't want to belabor, the biography part, but it took me a long time to realize that my calling or my dharma in this life was uh, to write and be mess around with words and ideas, both in writing and in speech. Um, because I had never thought of it as a viable way to earn a living or anything. Which was silly because I should have realized even in college uh, that that was my bent. I was always, I changed majors a whole bunch of times because I would get interested in stuff. And then I get interested in something else. And I say, oh, maybe I'll be a psychologist. No, maybe I'll be an anthropologist, or, and it went on and on. And I thought I'd be an academic. But I realized after all the struggle and everything, looking back on it, that the only consistent thing in my college, the couple of years of graduate school before I dropped out, my first job, which was in a social work agency, the only consistent thing and the only consistent thing was if I had to write something, I'd be praised for it. So if I had a multiple choice test, not so great. If I had to write an essay or a term paper, I would always get great grades and people would compliment me on my writing. It didn't dawn on me that that was a clue
Yeah.
and that, maybe I should go to journalism school or, whatever it was. It took years to realize that was the consistent thing. And people went to graduate school with many years later, when I was struggling to earn a living as a writer, and I said to one of them, I should have stayed in graduate school like you and had a PhD and a nice stable life like you had. And he said, Phil, you hated it. I said, I did. He said, they said, yeah, I remember you. We were assigned to write the equivalent of a journal article about a sociology study, and you wrote a short story. And I said, oh my God, that's true. I would fantasize about just being a writer and being independent, not having a straight job. Um, and I did. And I didn't connect the dots until many years later. I just thought I was, doing the default position on things. But then when writing opportunities came along, I seized them and, I continued that way. And I just thought I was being lazy.
So let's do one more picture before we go to the,
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one.
yeah. And this one, I finally figured out you had just labeled it CSE, Center for Spiritual Enlightenment.
Yes, that's in San Jose. I was giving a talk there, looking very enthusiastic and wearing Indian
But the word
garments.
enlightenment is showing up in your
Yeah.
life.
Well, I aspired early on.
And you knew Roy Eugene Davis?
Yeah, we met a few times. Um, I think I interviewed him for American Veda as I interviewed you. Um, but we met in person on a couple of occasions. He couldn't have been more gracious and kind. And yeah, I thought very highly of him. And he was the sort of founder guru figure of Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, which is a Yogananda lineage offshoot. Uh, and that picture was taken when I spoke there. He probably was there on that occasion.
And it's fascinating because Unity of Tustin was very, very close to the Yogananda centers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the retreat centers. And I used to go there a lot, Lake
yeah.
Shrine and the shrine at
Encinitas probably.
Encinitas. And they became extremely important in my life. And it's really fascinating. Um, at one point in time, I went to the Encinitas retreat center, and I'm going to go up to my bookshelf and show you. Since we're just playing. And this picture was inside one of the temples
Yeah.
at Lake Shrine. And I walked in, no one was there. There wasn't any signs about anything.
Uh, uh,
And one of the pictures just absolutely lit up. And of course, it was a picture of master teachers.
yeah,
And the one that absolutely lit up and was the one of Yogananda. And I knew that this was extremely important for me to recognize and follow.
yeah.
And I began going to some of their services even and
Hmm.
learning, avid learner. Unity was becoming somewhat normative, and I was becoming totally
Yeah.
immersed in the mystical. And
I wrote about that actually in American Veda. You were sort
yes,
of a
and it's
pioneer of certain things at Unity.
exactly. And it's gone back to more normative, but still with meditation, Zen meditation, and unity basics taught by a longtime unity minister. So they now have three ministers instead of one. So real fascinating how emergence happens.
Yeah,
And of course, I feel sad about the things that aren't happening there now. And yet I realize there's beginners coming in who need to
yeah,
be taught the baby steps. And I'm finding now in my life, I'm less interested in teaching the baby steps. I'm more interested in teaching people about the third and the fourth acts of their lives and recognizing that past, present, and future are all one. And I want to ask you some questions about this uh, before we get to your book on karma. And I want to be sure to leave some time for that. But before we do that, let me go to the picture of you, Lori.
That's- the framed version is right up there. Yeah, that's my love of my life in early days of our relationship, I think,
You met
which is
her?
now 30 years.
Yeah, you met her. This picture was taken in 2002. Uh,
Okay, so we met in 95.
and in 2002, you wrote to me, we were soon to be married.
That's right.
And so you and Lori have been together for 30 years, but never
Yeah,
had children.
no children. My second marriage, her first. And we lived together for almost 7 years when we got married. And um, I told everybody that all the cells in your body change every 7 years. So we were waiting for the cells to complete the change.
That was the teaching of Charles Fillmore.
Was
Uh,
it?
7 years human plane, 12 years spiritual plane.
Oh, okay.
And I've kind of made up the soul's framework of 10 years, so decades of your life. And
Yeah.
from 0 to 100 reflects that. So it's real interesting. So American Veda, are there other books you want to talk about before American Veda?
Well, I published books before that, but they were,
Road Signs
I
was
had
one.
a sort of subsidiary career doing ghostwriting and collaboration. Like a lot of aspiring writers, um, in the early days, I wasn't getting paid well enough writing what I wanted to write and what really interested me. Like I wrote a novel and published a novel in the mid 90s that, six, seven people read outside my family. And I'm working on the sequel to it now, all these years later. But so I was lucky that people came to me for help writing books, and I resented it, to be honest. It was like, no, I want to be paid to write my own stuff. And then realized half the writers in the world, more, 80, 90% of the people with those aspirations are, waiting tables or working in, Best Buy or something, and to pay the bills. And I was getting writing assignments to help other people write and to do ghostwriting. And so that helped me learn the craft and learn the business of writing. And it allowed me the independence to keep working on my own stuff. And then finally, I was able to focus on the subjects and the genres that were coming more from inside me, but took a long time. And so prior to American Veda, I published a couple of books that I'm proud of, including my novel. But there was also a lot of collaboration. And to be perfectly honest, one of the one of my collaborations in the 90s, I just got a royalty check for. So it's it's it helps, because you know, we're in the world, Marge. We're spiritual beings, and people like you and me, that's our highest priority. And of my worldly activities, other than family and love, my writing is what matters to me. And we have to pay the bills. We have to chop wood and carry water, as the Zen people say. And so that's part of the challenge of integrating our spiritual lives with, the mundane.
So let's talk about American Beta. Anything, well, first of all, I wanted to mention Road Signs was the very first book I think I ever read of yours. And I quoted it in a talk on a Sunday morning. And so it was that significant to me and that important to me. And it was, I think you were talking about things that you sort of learned with other people.
Yeah, well, that I'm very proud of that book, and I was always very disappointed it didn't do better, but it's still out there. Road Signs on the Spiritual Path, and I wrote it. Um, I revisit it from time to time because I need to look something up or say, didn't I write about that somewhere? Oh, yes, it's in Road Signs. What did I say? And I'm still proud of it. It's like 30 years ago or so. But it was essentially written for uh, to help people on the spiritual path, serious spiritual people, and drawing from what I've learned and what my research gave me. And it was all about the challenges of life on a spiritual path and the issues we have to deal with in integrating spiritual life with, what we what we incorrectly call real life, uh, but the illusory life of, being in the world. And so I'm proud of it. And thank you for recognizing that it has some value.
Yeah. Well, and then, of course, the one that really blew me away, and I felt so honored that you wanted to interview me to be part of it, was American Beta. And it still is my all-time favorite of all of your books. Um, and just so profoundly beautiful. I still have the copy of it that I can grab occasionally, and I
Oh, you
know
have the hardcover. Wow.
do and know exactly where you were talking about me and Unity of Tussin
Yeah.
because I've got my name and Unity of Tussin circled on
Well,
page
that
30.
was a chapter on New Thought and the influence of India's
Exactly.
spiritual teachings on the Fillmores and all the other New Thought luminaries.
But then you wrote the book on Yogananda, and that
Yeah.
was an amazing success. And tell us about that one.
Well, after American Veda, and for listeners who don't know, American Veda covered the whole history of how the teachings that were born in India came to the West and influenced American spiritual landscape. And I mean, I did a lot of research and did a thorough job, and I think most of it holds up. Uh, and after that was published, and I was thinking what to write next, um, somehow the idea of like, well, you wrote about all these gurus and important figures who came here. Maybe a biography of one of them would make sense. And there were some of the people I wrote about had already had biographies written about them. But I had gotten fascinated with Yogananda's life because he was obviously one of the important gurus who came here. Uh, I think one of the, if not the most influential, certainly in the top three. And but of but we knew more about his personal life than we do about most holy men, because if they're renunciates, they don't talk much about their early lives and childhood. But of course, Yogananda had the autobiography of a yogi, which was hugely, hugely uh, popular and was still being read all those years later and still is. And so I was fascinated by it. And when I wrote the chapter on him and his influence on the West, um, I had to keep it short because it was just one chapter in a book. And I thought if I had space, I would have written a lot more because it was a fascinating life story. And so I thought, well, maybe him. And I realized first thing people would say is, why write a biography of somebody who was famous for an autobiography that millions of people had read? And so I revisited Autobiography of a Yogi and counted the pages. And I realized that less than 10% of the book was about his life after he came to America. And that was more than half of it was most of his adult life. And I realized a lot was left out. And so I said, okay, this is a story worth telling, and I'll fill in the gaps that he didn't include. So I set out to, do a proper biography. Um, and I did. And people think um, I must be a disciple of Yogananda. And I always have to say, no, I was never a formal student of his. I never became a disciple or anything or a devotee. He was in India, they have a term called upaguru, that you may have your Sadguru, your main guru, but you can have many upagurus, sort of subsidiary gurus from whom you learn, but you don't have that personal disciple relationship with. And he was a primary upaguru in my life. I've learned a tremendous amount from him and his writings and his work, but I never became a formal student. And that helped me because in writing a biography, I could be more objective.
And so it was published 100 years later after he came to America.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
good timing.
and so it's really, really one of the significant books now on Yogananda, especially in his life in America.
Yeah, I'm
And
always pleased when devotees of Yogananda, people who or for whom he's their guru, um, write to me and tell me they learned things they were glad to
so
learn.
you mentioned that you have a disciple relationship with of your own. Talk a little bit about that.
I wouldn't say that actually,
You said the
because
closest, you told me the closest thing to what
the
David now.
closest thing to it was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, because I mentioned earlier I was drawn to his transcendental meditation in the late 60s and became a teacher trained by him. And so I spent a lot of time around him and worked for his movement, his organization, for a good part of the 70s. Um, and so if anybody deserves to be called my guru, he was certainly my first guru and the most influential. But I never had, even in those days, a classic guru-disciple relationship that in the classic sense of the word. I was a student of his. He was my spiritual mentor and an influential figure, and I revered him. And but as time went by, I found I'm too independent. And I wanted to learn from other sources. And I didn't feel comfortable being confined in an organizational or institutional structure. And I certainly could not have written the books I did if I had, stayed in that kind of structure or setting, as a representative of something or a member of something. So I've been independent. And, for many of us, the traditional guru disciple kind of relationship just is inappropriate. And I think I was one of them.
I think I was one of them
Yeah,
also. And also, the same would apply to my role in the unity movement.
clearly.
I'm clearly beyond normative unity or fundamentalist unity. They have their fundamentalist arm also. And I'm in the mystical,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
includes unity, but it
And
includes all of the other religions or spiritual paths as well.
of course I agree with you. And that's why I wrote about your work in American Veda, because I wrote about it because you were among your many influences were the traditions from India. And you are bringing people like Andrew Harvey and our friend David now into Unity to teach. And that I found important to mention. But one of the things I learned in all my research of all the different organizations and spiritual institutions is at one point or another, they all, you know, in the world of Judaism, they'll tell you there's the Orthodox, the conservative, and the Reform.
Yeah.
And then the mystics are off on the side. And I realized it, it may not be a formal structure, but every spiritual organization ends up having a conservative, an Orthodox, a conservative, and Reform subdivisions, because that's how human beings are. They're orthodox people who are literal and go by the book and are very protective of this is how things are done and this is how it must be. And then there's people who are, less rigid. And then there's the reformers who want to change things and do things creatively and do things differently. And then there are the outcasts who are on the fringes, and on the periphery. They have some connection, but they're doing their own thing. And it's always like that. It's sometimes subterranean, because people don't necessarily own up to, that they don't like
I,
the orthodoxy.
I think I would own up to being one of the outcasts.
Yeah, you did.
Sometimes say about me, oh yeah, but she's not really unity. Unity, other unity ministers would say
Right,
that.
right, right.
So let's go now to the book that you are currently in the process of promoting and thrilled about, Karmic Relief. And tell us about that. And then I want to ask you some questions about it.
Well, it was a kind of natural. When I first started studying the Eastern philosophies and teachings, karma, of course, came up. It was one of the consistent things in all the different schools and all the different lineages. Karma was an accepted, a consistent aspect of it. There's nuanced differences I discovered in researching the book, but the basic understanding of karma and that it's a lawful cause and effect mechanism in the universe, that's part of the core teachings. And I was curious about it. I questioned it. Read about it over the years, like a lot of other aspects of those teachings. But you remember back in the 80s, there were the series of comedy shows called Comic Relief that were raising money, Robin Williams and those people. And I remember at the time joking and using the term karmic relief because comic relief was on people's lips. And at one point I said, well, that would make a good book title. And I didn't know what the book was. I thought maybe, I'll write a novel and I'll call it Karmic Relief. And then I realized, no, I should write a book about karma. But it took me forever. It was always on my list of maybe projects to take on. And but I didn't do it for a long time. My wife and my late agent, they would say, maybe you should write that book about karma, or when are you going to write it? And I didn't. And then but over the years, I saw the word and the concept being used more and more by people, ordinary people, not just, my yoga friends or whatever, or my Buddhist friends, but ordinary people would use karma, and news reporters would use the word karma, and sports writers would use the word karma. And then you saw it in TV commercials and sitcoms and brand names and song titles. And when I heard that Taylor Swift had a song called Karma, I said, okay, it's really mainstream. But I've also noticed that people don't quite get it right, or they misuse the term and misunderstand things about it. So maybe I should write a book about it. And so I did. And so it's now out. And I'm happy to say that the original title didn't change. It's Karmic Relief. And my latest
And so the
task,
question that I immediately asked you was, what about golden karma? And
I
and
had never heard the term.
and that's probably because although Jung wrote about it, Carl Jung, he never called it that. Other writers called it that afterwards, and they became some of my major teachers. And so, where are you at now with the possibility that you, in fact, may have come into this lifetime with some kind of destiny path where you were to guide others in ways that were beyond the normative, um, the golden realm.
If that's what golden karma means, then I'm either blessed or cursed to have it. And I always felt that I had some purpose that, or I, it sounds pretentious if you're not careful to say, oh, I meant to, have this influence on the planet or whatever. And I don't have that kind of grandiosity. And maybe I'd have reached more people and sold more books if I did. But part of my karma has always been I don't I don't like people who put themselves up as, guru figures, making claims about themselves and their level of influence and all that. I never wanted to be one of those people. That's why Andrew and I said, come back and we'll pretend you're the great guru and you'll make money. But but at the same time, I felt, I obviously have a calling and I'm drawn to do certain things. And if I step back and say, oh, this is not just like Phil's ambition or Phil's imagination about what he wants to write and what he wants to teach, there's some inner compulsion, some inner guidance that's directing me in that way. And so, just shut up and get out of the way and let it happen. And so I've come to accept that in my as just as I've come to accept that I'm an elder. Took me a long time to admit it and own up to it, but I'm an elder now and I've learned a lot. And so I feel like um, as long as I'm still sane and cogent and uh, energetic, uh, I have a responsibility to show up and share whatever I know and make an impact. So it's taken me a while to accept that, but it's obviously true if I look back at what I've done, especially the last, 20 years or so.
So, one thing that we usually do about this time is we do our shift and we go into the potential of where we have what I call, instead of questions and answers, although it can include that, the oh my God sharing moments. Oh my God, this happened to me in my life. I've had parallel experiences. And I, but before we do that, um, I want to invite everyone to uh, give a love donation. The link is in the emails always. And that is in recognition of the fact that Called by Love Institute is 100% supported by love donations. There's no outside big funder, unless it would be considered me, where I pour money in if it's needed. And interestingly, some of that came to me as a result of perhaps golden karma when I moved from California to Kansas City and bought a home here that was about a third of the cost of what it would have been in California. And I
Yeah.
call that golden California gold.
Yeah. We discovered that when we moved to Massachusetts from Los Angeles.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you and your beloved wife, Lori, made that shift to Massachusetts, as I did, back to Kansas City, in the fourth act of your lives.
I know. And That was before I accepted that I'm an elder, and we joke that usually when you get to a certain age, you move to a house that doesn't have steps and into a warm climate, and we did the opposite.
So how do you deal with the steps?
It's a form of exercise. How I'll deal with it down the road, we'll figure out. But
You
right
could
now,
always
it's
do
fine.
another
It's a good exercise. Yeah.
step. Anyway, I am delighted that you have been part of the framework that and were willing to share and apply the karmic kind of concept into the stages of your own life. I wish there had been more opportunity in the times of great gurus to have these kinds of recorded conversations. For
Yeah.
example, I would have loved to have seen Jesus interviewed about his relationship with Mary Magdalene.
I'm sure there's somebody out there claiming to be able to interview him.
I'm sure there are. And so, in addition to the love donation button on our email, there's also a join the tribe button. And that's how you get in on our mailing list, where you receive our monthly emails. And interestingly, I also want to take a moment to mention that I posted on my Facebook page, I'm learning a few things about technology, a picture that has the announcement of Phil's upcoming e-course on karma with science,
Yes.
spirituality, and practice uh, resources for spiritual living. And interestingly, I've never used a Substack. Maybe I should learn how.
Substack is quite easy, even for, technophobes like me. So if I master they make it quite easy, actually. So look into it.
And I checked my YouTube page just this morning and only posted that yesterday. And it has already had, when I checked it, 65 views.
Nice.
That is nice. So
Oh,
I
let me tell your audience, I just got an email from Spirituality and Practice today that the date was changed. So on what you printed out and what I sent out yesterday, it says it starts December 1st. It starts December 8th. Not that it matters, but now you
yeah.
know.
Details don't matter, but get on Phil's mailing list or their mailing list if you want to learn about that e-course. And Phil talked about the advantages of it. It's not a live online course via Zoom, so there's no scheduling difficulties. And what happens is you get a series of 12 email lessons every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and beginning December blank, since
8th,
that's been changed, and ending December blank, since that's
January something.
January something. And every lesson includes some suggested practices, experiences, questions, and ideas can be brought up in a practice circle. And there is a live Zoom meeting
Yeah,
uh,
one.
included. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to share with our list the information about that because I think that's something that will interest a lot of people.
Thank you, Marge.
I see a couple of people that I especially want to bring on, and one of them is the guest that we're going to be having next month, Coral Rose, and I'd like to bring her on last. But Coral was part of Sam's Club and also that moved toward Walmart with Sam Walton and and uh, uh, and she was part of bringing that worldwide for, as Phil said, for better or for worse. And she assured him it was for what she did was for better. So we'll bring her on last. And John Welshons, I see, is here. You probably know John. He's written many books also. And I would love to bring you on, John, right now and let you have a few oh my God moments or uh, some dialogue with our beloved friend, Phil Goldberg.
Hi, John.
Hi, Phil. How nice to see you.
You too.
Yeah, it's interesting because Phil and I don't think have ever met in person, but
I don't recall if we did, but
oh,
if we did, it was a long time ago.
and who knows what state we were in.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have karma that is very similar in that they're the two unity churches that I'm most connected with historically have been Unity of Tustin in California and Unity of Albany in New York State. And
Me too.
I know. So we kind of follow each other around to these wonderful places and friendships with Brahms, David Now, and most of all with you, Marge, because there's one thing that always comes to mind when you were talking earlier about being sort of outside the mainstream of unity and how I think, all of us have found ourselves outside the mainstream of whatever stream we were in. And but I do remember when you and I first met, Marge, and I started to go around to many other unity churches. And almost every one of the ministers said to me, when I would mention you, they would say, "Oh, well, Marge is, there are unity ministers, and then there's Marj Britt. She's in a category by herself. Most unity ministers are metaphysicians, and Marge is a mystic." So I took that as a very high compliment for you, but just made me very proud to be your friend. And Phil, I just remember the first time I saw American Veda, I thought that is such a great title for a book. I have to read that because it just, it's such, certainly we would think, an important part of our culture, for the last 50 years and more, but really became prominent in the last 50 years.
Hmm.
And, we also have many of the same influences. My wife, Maureen, is very connected to Yogananda. I've been very connected with Meher Baba and Neem Karoli Baba, and had Ram Dass as a friend for 45 years. Um, and it's all just we're all just kind of dancing around, or as Ram Dass used to,
Walking each other
walking
home.
each other home. Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I just want to appreciate both of you and everyone else who's on the call, and just happy to have this opportunity to say hello, if not in person, in the cybersphere.
Thank you, John. I appreciate
You.
it.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And John, you and I will be doing one of these conversations sometime next year,
Okay.
sooner rather than later. So I need to call you. uh, you know,
Anytime.
what I realized now, not then, when people would say those kinds of things about me, I really thought that once people saw how a campus of consciousness developed and attracted incredible world-class speakers from that everyone would want to model that. And I just assumed it was happening other places. And it was not until I retired and started looking for a Unity church to go to that I found out it was not true. I could not find another Unity church within driving distance of my home in Tustin, which interestingly may be one of the reasons I'm back here in Kansas City. I am within driving distance of Unity on the Plaza, which, fascinating to me, has two services occurring simultaneously at the same time in different sanctuaries because it's a huge building. The
Wow.
main Unity service is in the main sanctuary, which used to constantly be filled. It's no longer that way. It's struggling. The other service is called Temple Buddhist Center, TBC, and it's packed for two
Wow.
services every single Sunday. That is fascinating to me. And right now, my preference is to go to Temple Buddhist Center because the Unity service tends to be more normative, and Temple Buddhist Center is on the cutting line, cutting
Hmm.
edge. And when Brad Laughlin was here recently, I connected him with the director of Temple Buddhist Center, and they arranged for him to come and do a weekend speaking at both services. Why are we still creating walls? You know, when will we recognize our own oneness? And one of the things that I realized that is a great gift, and I don't know, Phil, if you've heard this yet, but in early November, there was a vote that occurred with online. People could tune in and they had to clarify their good standing as Unity ministers in order to do that. And I was one of those people that had to clarify my good standing. And then over 1,000 ministers online voted for the two organizations, the Association of Unity Churches, which became known as Unity Worldwide, and Unity World Headquarters to become one organization. It was called not a merger, which had failed one time when I was part of the leadership team that tried to make it happen 10 or 12 years ago, and it failed. Now it passed with over 1,000 ministers voting online, and people, the yeses were in the 900s out of those 1,000. And so there is a new face emerging potentially, and it'll be interesting to see how it reveals itself. So it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news for me. I voted yes. There were those who voted no, and it'll be interesting to see what their response will be and whether or not it moves into another state of separation. But the that vote said something to me. And I posted a post that reflected a saying that Andrew Harvey taught me: when the two shall become one, you will enter the kingdom of heaven. And that, of course, comes from the Gospel of Thomas. So it's still in process. It's still emerging. And thank you so much, John Welshans, for coming on and saying hello. I hope the two of you got better acquainted
We did. Good.
on this call. And when John comes on, uh, Phil, you'll get more acquainted with him.
It's a
And
deal.
Carl Rose, say hello to us. just briefly and tell us about you now live in Arkansas.
Yes.
You drove
Yes.
up here and spent the weekend with me, and actually, Brad Laughlin stayed here also. It
hmm
was a wonderful time, and we did the first Holly home event
hmm
ever
Yeah.
uh, Tuesday, following the events that were Sunday and Sunday afternoon and Monday at Temple Buddhist Center. So, Phil, I don't know if that would be something that you would be interested in looking at. I can make the connection for you if you are.
I like Kansas City. I was there, I don't know how long ago, speaking at the Kansas City Vedanta Center. There's a wonderful Swami there who I got to know. And I'm curious about those temple Buddhist centers. Is it a lot of Asian Buddhist people, or is
No,
it? It's not.
uh, there is the Victor Doherty is the main director, and he's not an ordained unity minister. He's in the process of going through uh, the process of learning all of the ins and outs. Um, and the other person and he speaks part of the time, and the other person that speaks is Robert Brummett, who was on the ministerial school faculty um, for Unity Ministerial School, which no longer exists in person and is only there's ministerial training online now. So things change. And
Yeah. Well,
it,
I'd love the opportunity to go back and see that the most incredible Kuan Yin statue in the world is in Kansas City at the what is it
Nelson
called?
Art Gallery.
Nelson Gallery. It's the most beautiful uh, piece of work. So,
So
hi,
I
Coral.
know that you're invited, Philip, and I will give you some contact information with
Sure. Yeah,
here. And you know, once I make the connection, I'm really good at making connections. Once I make the connection, I just back out of it and let the two people introduce themselves to each other and talk about what could be or what might be or
sure.
why. But your video will be available
Good.
our YouTube page, and that will be part of a connection in and of itself. And so, Carl, come on next and tell us about a little more about you, our next guest for next week, next
Okay.
month.
Next month. First of all, I'm delighted to be here with everyone on the call. And Phil, when we were in India 8, 9 years ago, I'll never forget that I believe in Varanasi, when you handed out your American Veda books to our host, they said, "Oh, America has their own Vedas."
I,
I I tell people that often. I just thought it was wonderful. I said,
I,
"Yes, we do."
I
Um,
had a Swami actually yell at me.
yeah,
He hadn't
yeah,
read the book, but he said, "Now the Americans are claiming the Vedas." I said, "No,
exactly.
that's not what the
Exactly.
book is about."
Exactly. Exactly. And Marge, I wrote Brad a note a day or two of gratitude, and I said to him, what being with both you and Marge was a mystical delight. So it was such a joy being there with the both of you. Um, and I look forward to next month and really the small part that uh, that Spirit allowed me to play with Walmart moving to a more organic, sustainable way of doing business was I was just the vehicle and a small part of that. And just I'll share a little bit about that as you guide us through those stages. And I do want to say, Marge, I haven't mentioned this to you, but I thought of it earlier when we joined the call with Phil that I was told a few years after this occurred by a group of people, disciples of an enlightened master who was in his body at the time, who had said that the only way for a more sustainable way of doing agriculture and food safety for the world would be if Walmart embraced organics. And they told me this afterwards, after all of that happened. And, I had met with them often, and they said, "We want you to know this, that this was set, that this is what it would take." And yeah, I just find that so interesting that I just thought of that, Phil, when we were on the call. So, yeah, so I'll be happy to share and really look forward to it. So, thank you for the invitation, Marge. And what a delight, John, to see you as well.
And the third Wednesday of December, which is early in the month, and because it's before the Christmas holidays kick in. And the title, because it is coming in the Christmas holiday season, the title will be about the gifts of your life. And Coral has a wonderful background with her lineage extending from Hawaii to California, and now, of course, into Arkansas, where she personally knew Sam Walton and worked for him in the early stages of the development of Sam's Club. And so these moments in time where we come together and we don't understand what it all means. We don't realize how it could impact the world. And that's partly what I experienced as I sent you the two emails, Phil, on what I ultimately found on my Google search. Thank God for things like Google. I do use AI when it comes to Google. Never to write with, interestingly. But it's called there, uh, Golden Shadow. And it talks about the whole lineage of writers and people and teachers who picked up the idea of this golden karma that probably comes from past lives. Oh, and Phil, I was fascinated to see in your Substack description that one of the topics you intend to talk about is reincarnation. So,
Well, you can't not talk about it if you're writing about karma. And so I limited it, but there's a consideration of it in karmic relief. And every time I speak on the subject, it is very hard to account for karma being a real operative phenomenon in the universe without multiple lives. They go hand in hand.
and I also loved your talking about your mystical aunt who believed in astrology.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I never took it seriously until the pandemic. And then I signed up for something that I thought would just be entertainment. And all of a sudden, I began to
Yeah,
learn things that I was constantly saying, "Oh my God, is this
yeah.
real?"
Yeah,
And
I've had astrologers blow my mind on a
yeah,
few occasions. The
and
good ones.
are out of time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, beloved one, Holy Spirit, thank you for bringing together this group of souls that is willing to open into the vastness, open into that which is beyond anything that we understand with our human minds, and simply say, it is as it is. And so many blessings, blessings upon blessings upon blessings.
Thank you, Marj.